Today's video is about comfort and whether feeling comfortable is a good or bad thing. I saw a quote recently that read, "A comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing grows there." And it got me thinking about comfort. And so I brought it up with my friend Jared, and he even said to me that he believes without adversity, there isn't any growth. And so it made me think, should we be seeking out comfort in our lives? Is it good to be comfortable, or is it bad? Or, even furthermore, is comfort the thing that's holding us back? Some of the worst times in my life have actually pushed me to change and grow the most. And a good example of this is my sophomore year of college. For those of you who don't know, I went to Pepperdine University, and I was so excited to get accepted. I was on scholarship. I sang in the choir. And my mom's dad had agreed to pay for my schooling as a loan, but with lower interest than we could get from the banks at the time. And my sophomore year, he decided right before school was going to start that he wasn't going to do that anymore. And at that point, I couldn't apply for financial aid. I couldn't do anything to go. I had to withdraw temporarily and apply to a local community college in Seattle. And so that's what I did. And to say that transition and that forced transfer was hard on me is an understatement. It was one of the darkest times in my life, and dark like emotionally, but also literally, because the only thing I could afford was to rent a basement apartment that just had these little slits for windows at the top. And while I was incredibly unhappy during that time, one of my friends during that year even told me, "You're hard to be around." And I was like, what do you think it's like for me? So even though it was incredibly trying and difficult for me emotionally, and out of that came such growth and appreciation for what I had. So when I returned to Pepperdine my junior year, I couldn't have been more excited. I took advantage of all the things it had to offer. I did a ton of extracurricular activities. I just did everything I could because I realized how much I wanted to be there, how much I needed it. And I would even argue that maybe I worked harder. And so that's just one example in my life. But also I find like trying times push me to make decisions that maybe I'm putting off. Like things that I think might be a little bit difficult for someone else. Hey, I'm a people pleaser. It's hard. Maybe relationships that need to end. There's often an outside issue that happens, stirs things up, makes me uncomfortable. And then I'm finally able to do that, to cut that friend off or change that relationship dynamic or set that boundary that I've been nervous to do. When I brought this up in a hangout on Patreon, a member of our community shared that she even felt comfortable in toxic and abusive relationships. And that was such a light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh my God, yes, because sometimes we're so used to abuse, we're so used to being harmed or overlooked that is what's comfortable for us. And discomfort could actually be healthy. I even talked on a podcast with Kale Lowry. If you don't know Kale, she's lovely. I love her. She has a ton of podcasts of her own, and she's a mother of 6, I believe now, maybe 7. Anyway, love Kale. And she shared how it was really difficult for her to find a partner that wasn't like the past partners. They all seem to have these same things in common. And I talked a lot with her about the fact that that's because those things are comfortable to you, because you're used to them. And so sometimes comfort can be a trap, right? It can hold us in a place we don't want to be. It can mean that we perpetuate an unhealthy relationship or behavioral pattern that doesn't serve us. Just because we've been abused and we're used to that mistreatment doesn't mean that that's a healthy place for us. And so sometimes comfort can actually mean bad things and harmful things. As a therapist, I do know with 100% certainty, which I'm not 100% certain about a lot of things, but I do know that the path to healing, the path to recovery, lies in our ability to sit in discomfort and not run away from it. Meaning that the change that we have to create is our ability to sit with that this doesn't quite feel right, right? Like if we're referencing the thing I just talked about, like how comfort can be an abusive or toxic relationship, then to be in a relationship that isn't that way is going to feel uncomfortable. And our healing and growth depend on our ability to sit in it, to be okay with it, and to allow that change to happen. If we run away from that discomfort, we'll find ourselves back in those toxic or abusive situations, right? Or doing the behavior we don't want to do anymore. It's almost like when we try to stop using our eating disorder behavior, our self-injury urges, when we don't do that, we can feel incredibly uncomfortable because that's a change in behavior, right? That is the thing we used to do to soothe. When we don't do that unhealthy thing, how do we feel? Shitty. But it's in our ability to sit with that we move forward. Also, and I'm just referencing my notes, but this is a really important piece to it, is that only seeking things that make us comfortable doesn't help us grow our perspective or challenge our beliefs. It can mean that we aren't able to understand other people, other cultures, or religions, see another side, right? Sometimes I feel like online people just scream into these echo chambers of people saying the same things, like, yeah. It's all amazing. That doesn't actually help. Now, I'm not recommending that we bully each other or shout each other down, but I think there is a place for healthy discourse, for, did you think about this? Or did you consider that perspective? Because often we grow up with a certain set of beliefs, a certain set of patterns of behavior, things that are okay and not, and we don't really question them until somebody kind of pushes that upon us. And I think if it's done with care and love and with the idea that we all need to change and grow, I think it can be healthy, right? And this thought process that we can't grow without a little discomfort, right? You can't turn is it coal into diamonds? Yeah, I think something like that, right? You can't do that without a lot of pressure. It made me think of post-traumatic growth. So I went down a whole rabbit hole of research. And if you have not heard of post-traumatic growth, it's essentially what we're talking about. It's the research-backed belief that we as humans are what is called an anti-fragile system, meaning that it's through pressure that we get stronger, through that trauma, which I know holds a bad connotation, and I'll talk through that, but it's through the discomfort, that's probably a better word, through the discomfort and the difficulty that we grow. It's almost like the way we build muscles is that you like beat them up, right? You kind of tear them and they grow. And as they pull against your bones get stronger, right? We as humans are like, our whole system is anti-fragile. It's filled with signs of post-traumatic growth. Now, I don't say that to say that we should be traumatized, but you can see how we grow through adversity. And I also read about how we see this in our immune system, that if we don't expose ourselves to mild stressors, varied environments, little bits of bacteria, a little bit of, sickness, right? Then it doesn't know how to handle anything. That's actually why they tell parents, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but a lot of people with small children, they tell them to kind of put them around other kids a little bit and not have them be completely in a bubble, because otherwise their immune system doesn't know what to do with anything. Now, it's not saying like expose your child to things immediately, but you do want them to build up their immune system little by little. We want it to be strong. Again, we grow through a little discomfort or a little adversity. I found that incredibly interesting because I do know that that's why vaccines work. If you aren't aware, when we get a vaccine, it has a little bit of the thing that we're trying to inoculate ourselves from. So it has a little bit of that virus or that bacteria. So our body can look at it and be like, I know what that is. So if we get sick later, right, it's like, I recognize that and I remember how we got out of it. And I believe that's kind of how our emotional system is too, right? We learn from these bad things or this adversity or this discomfort so that when we move forward in our life, we're like, I've dealt with someone who oversteps my boundaries. I remember how to deal with this. And so our immune system is like kind of a reflection of that. And I thought that was really interesting. And even personally, I'm just referencing my notes again so I don't forget anything. I know that if I'm not met with some kind of adversity, that I may not take the action that I really need to take. And it can be harder for me to do things sometimes because it's nice to be comfortable, right? Even though it's often stagnation, it can feel kind of nice, especially if we were raised in a household where things were incredibly chaotic. And so what I'm talking to you about today might feel like it goes against everything that you're trying to learn or everything that you've been working towards. And again, I'm not saying that we have to seek out adversity or trauma, but I do think that there's growth and discomfort. I even saw this as a random last note. I saw this when I went to Pepperdine, because if those of you who don't know Pepperdine University, it's a school filled with a lot of wealthy children. It's a private university. I was on scholarship. I am not one of those wealthy children, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because one thing I did see time and time again is the students that were my classmates who never had to worry about paying for anything, often had everything just given to them. A large portion of them wouldn't show up for class, wouldn't apply themselves. They would say things like, oh, I'll just work for my parents, or it's no big deal, or I don't know what I'm gonna do for the summer. There was no challenge. There was no potential adversity. There was no adversity on the horizon. Everything was already kind of pre-planned for them. And that left them in this state of kind of, for lack of a better term, just the I don't care. And did they learn things? I don't know, hopefully. Did they grow as a person? I'm not so sure. And so even though as a poor kid that was on, scholarship, I was so jealous of the fact that they didn't have a car that was 20 years old and they didn't have student loans that were like, like our national debt just running so quickly. I was jealous, but now as an adult, I look back and I'm like, I don't really think that's good. I think we do need a little bit of adversity, a little discomfort to push us to do better things, because we're all capable of great things. Sometimes we just need some little challenge to get us started, to spark that, to motivate us. Overall, I think I agree with the quote that a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing grows there. Because I know that I don't grow without being challenged. But I also know it's a balance, because if I'm constantly challenged day in and day out, I feel overwhelmed, I feel burnt out, and I can find myself living in survival mode, which isn't good or healthy for me either. And so I think in the end, it's really a balance. I think there should be times where we're challenged, and it's also okay to relax for a bit, because we don't need to push ourselves to the limit each and every day. I think that's why people can end up having ulcers and all sorts of medical ailments, not to mention mental health issues, right? Like depression and anxiety. And so it's really this balance that we should seek, where we can strive for better things. We can challenge ourselves and push ourselves for more. And then when we achieve one of those short-term or long-term goals, we allow ourselves to enjoy it for a period of time before we look to the next. Now, what those periods will look like for you is going to be different. But I'd love to hear more from your thoughts. Do you think a comfort zone is a bad thing? Do you think seeking comfort means stagnation? Or do you think that we should all want to be more comfortable? I'd love to hear your thoughts. This was fascinating to research and to just do some internal research about. So let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Go outside. There's a squirrel. Roxy, go get it. Oh my goodness.